Good afternoon, everyone. Carasoft would like to welcome you to the DOTIS 2023 webinar series, Innovate, Adapt, Collaborate. On behalf of Carasoft Technology, I would like to welcome you to the Babel Street webinar, Securing Your Inner Circle, Mastering Insider Risk Management with Public Data Insights.
Great. Thanks very much, Maggie. You can stop sharing the screen so that the panel can be full size. My name's Rebecca Hirschfield, and I'm with the marketing team at Babel Street. Thanks very much for joining us today. We're very excited to have this program on holistic insider threat management. And so I'd like to get us started right now with a question. And that is, what is an insider threat and what's the difference between risk and threat? Hunter, what's your input on that?
Yeah, so basically what we're talking about is prevention, okay? Threat is a risk that has materialized into a legitimate threat or an act or threat has already occurred. You always want to stay what I call the risk management space, which is called left of boom. The boom is an actual threat or an act that's already occurred. So we want to stay left of that, left of boom. We want to stay in that risk management space that's left of that. So we always want to be operating in that space. Because if you wait till the boom, it's just too late. So you have to take a proactive and holistic insider risk. You have to have a proactive and holistic insider risk management program that we'll talk more about today.
Tricia?
Hi, Rebecca. Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly with what Hunter said. I think a threat has already likely occurred versus a risk where we're always trying to get to on an insider threat program effectively is identify the risk and help prevent it and help it by helping the person or activity that's being targeted or is having an issue. I think insider threat programs are really misunderstood. They're really about prevention and interdiction. Not punitive by any means. That's not the intent. They're not big brother like. And I think people just often get those confused. I'd like to just quote something from the ARLIS, the Applied Research Lab in Intel and Security. They are the research lab really for the Intel security community under the Department of Defense, under USDI, under Secretary of Defense for Intelligence. And they coin it like this: it's management versus elimination. It's supporting analysis of the interaction of an individual in their environment. And it's viewing people as part of the solution. And I know Hunter's going to talk a lot more about that. People are everything in this, and we need to help drive down the risk with their involvement and engagement.
So let's dive into that further, absolutely, because what we're trying to get at today is, what are the essential components of a holistic insider risk management program? You want to start us off on that track, Tricia?
Yeah, happy to. And you'll hear us probably until you can't stand to listen to it anymore, whoever's attending this seminar, but our webinar. But it's all about policy. And unfortunately, we are way behind in having a really cohesive policy for insider threat. And without policy, oftentimes it's just kind of left up to the attorney that is advising the agency that's implementing the program. And attorneys rely on law and policy and guidance to be able to make their determinations. So we have a lot of inconsistency in this space right now. But I was lucky enough to attend the AIA NDIA, which hopefully some of the participants on this webinar also attended, and the DNI National Counterintelligence and Security Center folks spoke, and they actually are writing policy for information sharing. Information sharing is another challenge in this community, and so the basic tenets that they want to put into policy is anything that is a direct threat of violence and malicious activity. This is straight from their briefing from the conference. Anything that's malicious activity that could compromise and/or damage information technology systems. Any information or threat that identifies an employee as a target for counterintelligence or counter-espionage. And then they have a very big category that says derogatory information. It's kind of like that category of other duties as assigned in your job description. And so that part needs work. But the community is in all the communities are working very closely together to try and get this right so that we can really, as Hunter says, get to the left of the boom and identify risk before it becomes a threat.
Mm-hmm. Hunter, what do you see as one of the essential components of a holistic program?
I mean, personally, I think leadership's everything. So I think it's imperative that strong leadership, that trusts empowers their employees to be part of the process is paramount. Ideally, if you empower your folks, and you increase trust, you minimize risk within your organization. So you want to empower your employee base to be part of the solution through a very active engagement and education. Like they're your first line of defense when it comes to mitigating risk in any organization. Leadership, human resources, legal, privacy, all always should be coordinated with on a routine basis. When operating inside a risk management program, over communication is always a good practice. And then when it comes to executing this mission, the concept of insider trust, you can get in the real intent of the program. And it comes, words have meaning, right? So like just calling it insider threat or insider risk has a negative connotation, right? So maybe call it your employee safety and wellness program instead. That it just has a better meaning to it. And again, it really empowers your populace to get them on board and get them bought into the program, because they really are your first line of defense and buying risk within your organization.
Mo, did you want to add to that?
Yeah, I'm just going to build on what my colleague said here. I really think that the three major tenets are the people, the policy, and the technology that go into that. I think Hunter and Tricia touched on it. People need to own it, whether it's from a leadership perspective or the people involved in it. And I think seeing them take ownership and see themselves as part of the solution is key to that. I think the training aspect is also, folks need to be constantly reminded and aware of what could be intentional or unintentional leakage of information and activities. So I think that constant awareness. It's also a collaborative set of stakeholders that has to do with HR, someone from legal and policy who can own some of the guidelines, if you will, or the SOPs, and it could be the law enforcement partners that work within the organizations who may have the authorities to enforce some of those activities. So definitely, from a people perspective, there's a holistic approach from the leadership, but also empowering every member of the organization to feel like they're taking their own ownership. From a technology perspective, I think there's a lot of current systems in place that work really, really well. I think what they have not traditionally done is evolve with the modern threat landscape. I think as we all now have the idea of digital exhaust. We live online. We live a footprint. I have a LinkedIn account. I'm sure anyone can reverse engineer what I do and where I go. And some of the stuff that I may be putting online could be unintentional leakage. So being able to understand how technology can help sort through those things. And I think, like Hunter said, as we evolve from insider threat to insider risk, it really does, has a positive connotation to be more proactive, not just reactive in this landscape.
Thanks, Mo. That really dovetails into our next topic, which is, what are some of the biggest challenges that are facing both government and enterprises when it comes to insider threat? Do you want to continue that train of thought?
Absolutely. I think I'm going to use the word holistic a few times today, which is taking on some of the stuff that's already existing today and build on it to kind of keep pace with where the technology, where the threat is, where the data could be. The traditional methods that exist today are super powerful, and I think they identify or do a great job of identifying risk within a certain controlled environment. But what happens when folks, go outside that facility, go outside the environment? Do we have policies in place, or the technology in place, or the data in place to be able to have that holistic approach? For example, like I said, I already talked about like that LinkedIn example, but adversarial nations can reverse engineer who I am. They can identify certain trade events that I could be going to, and again, it could be intentional or it could be unintentional. I think for me, the concept of digital exhaust needs to be part of the conversation going forward. But more importantly, responsible use of that data is going to be super critical. And the challenge around that is there's still several interpretations of if you will, of what that digital exhaust looks like, and what are the tools and policies that needs to be implemented to manage that data.
Hunter, what are your thoughts on the challenges of facing the DoD when it comes to um, when it comes to this. Sorry, when it comes to insider threat.
Yeah, got it. Yeah, I think one of the biggest challenges that the DoD has right now is a lack of policy right now. There's no policy right now that constitutes, outlining a holistic insider risk management program and how to establish a sound program. So, when Executive Order 13587 dropped a few years ago, it did require federal agencies to, establish a, insider threat, type of capability, but it really didn't specify like how to go ahead and do it and how and what the foundational levels of success to, provide, to have a sound, program. So, we're lacking that right now. There's a Department of Defense directive right now, which is, right now the policy as is for the Department of Defense. However, the DITMAC under DCSA is currently working on a DODI, Department of Defense instruction, right now, that I think once codified and finalized will provide, a sound, policy standpoint on how to, institute, an insider threat program and give a foundation for how to really establish a sound program and then kind of build from there. So, but once that policy signed, I think that'll be a game changer in the industry. So, hopefully we can get that finalized soon.
Mm-hmm. And Tricia, what's your take on these on the challenges?
Well, I can speak for firsthand. Uh, Crossing privacy and civil liberties lines is very near and dear to the heart of our Department of Defense officials, right? They can't do that. They won't do that. And so therefore, I think it's kind of hampered maybe even the use of publicly available information to help codify or add more content to a review for an analyst. And so that's always been an issue. And that goes back to what Hunter just said. If you have a policy that the legal community can actually read and apply, then you're in a much better place, and I think your bandwidth gets bigger on what information you can use that comfortably or not use. But I can tell you, speaking with the experts, so the director of the DIPMAC and his operational director most recently, information sharing and resourcing. You always hear resourcing. If a program's not resourced, then you're on your own and you don't get very far. And so the leadership has to endorse the program, and resource the program, and then that will spawn hopefully information sharing across all those major disciplines that we spoke about: HR, legal, law enforcement, counterintelligence, personnel security. The management employee relations folks are critical, and of course the CIO, because you have to know what people are doing on the networks, because that's all part of it. But in speaking to James Chappelle, I think one of the things that he's really trying to do is a coherent, coordinated strategy, and execute that between the systems folks and the behavioral folks. And so it's sorry, I've got something going on with my computer here.
No, just
So
ignore the poll.
yeah, I know. Sorry
Not
about
for
that.
us.
And then one of the things that I know James Chappelle is working on at many of the local bases, a lot of the joint bases, installations, and recommending to the commands, it's something called the Prevention Assistance and Response program. And basically what that does is it gets all those components that I just spoke of to the table talking. Because usually if you have some sort of an insider issue going on, it's not limited to one discipline, right? It kind of permeates across several. So I would tell folks on this webinar to pay close attention to the work that the DIPMAC is doing on establishing those PAR programs, as they call them.
Let's transition a little bit. Mo brought up the topic of publicly available information, and that is partly what this webinar is about, which is how can a PAI system help identify insider risks and facilitate investigations? Tricia, what are your thoughts on that?
I think that this has always been my words, and that is that it's not what you're getting, it's what you're missing. And I think that the DIPMAC is doing their due diligence now in trying to start using more tools such as PAI, publicly available information. But they do it very deliberately and very diligently under the guise of, a review of their attorneys and as such. But they do it to analyze. They do it to analyze. They do it to add content to something that's already happened or is existing or something that's been reported or realized. And just to add content, I think PAI is a great tipping and queuing capability that could be used way more holistically in the future. But I think at least the DIPMAC, I know, is starting to use it, and the more you use, the more, especially with a vibrant policy behind you, the more you'll be able to know where your right and left limits are and how well it's helping you. From what I understand, their return on investment in using the PAI capability is pretty significant. But they have stated that still it's a little bit reactive because we have policy and privacy, civil liberties to concern ourselves with, and the policy non-existence or limited policy, is also a real, it sets them back on what they are comfortable and their attorneys are comfortable allowing them to get and do.
Mm-hmm. Mo, how would you build on that?
I think if we look at a modern approach to an insider risk program, PII continues to play a greater and even more valuable role. I think if we follow the same policy guidelines but apply them to how PAI, as long as we can do that in a responsible sense, PI can play a role in surfacing potential insider activities before they happen. So Hunter talked earlier about getting ahead of the boom. So if you can use PAI as digital sensors, as all of us, join public forums online and live in more and act more online, PAI can play a really important role in making sure that we get ahead of these activities, because we would have our digital sensors, if you will, looking for this information. And to me, it would be, again, done in a responsible way, but under the same policies and procedures that govern how we govern data today, that it was used, or systems that are used today in support of insider risk and insider threat. It would have to be focused on the CF4 guidelines. It would have to be, based on what folks are opting in terms of the population that is clear today and the level of clearances that they have. And it would also be an ability for us to capture maybe some indications of risk that maybe our traditional UAM capabilities or some of our access controls may not act. I think what it does is it just enhances our sensors so we can actually get ahead of that risk.
Hunter, what's your thought on that?
Yeah, I mean, Mo hits the nail right on the head. I really just put my old hat on. A PAI can be a huge enabler. We're talking about identity intelligence here, right? So it can be a very, key enabler in the holistic insider risk management space, left to boom, being proactive, to, identify, pertinent risk indicators, when it comes to a specific individual. So some things to take in consideration when you're taking a person, an identity, and you're trying to evaluate the risks that they may pose to an organization. So access to critical assets is one of them. Disciplinary issues and violations within HR, some network behaviors, either UAM, personnel management, physical security, life stressors. Those can be brought to bear through PAI, foreign nexus, and data exfiltration. So I think all of those things, PAI can be a key contributor into a bunch of those identity intelligence facets.
So let's move into the next stage of the discussion, which is really around what insider risk management professionals can do to enhance their programs. So let's talk a little bit about best practices. Tricia, what are you seeing, or what do you see as best practices when establishing and maintaining a holistic insider risk management program?
I think the most successful programs are going to be the ones that have 100% leadership engagement, that are sharing how important that information or how important that program is to them at a very senior level, on down through all of their, senior leaders, down to their management, down to their line personnel. So everybody understands that this is important to the boss, and executes accordingly. And then I'll tell you that the community that is doing this will tell you they have to have resourcing. If they don't have resourcing, they they can't move forward. But the key element to these programs is people, and the DIPMAC or DoD holds once a year. I think Hunter might have gone to it this year, a few months back. Their insider threat forums for the year annually, and their topic was the bystander. And what they're talking about is people. People work with people every day, whether it be online, whether it be sitting right next door in the cubicle next to you, and they see things, and what they need to understand is that reporting those things is not snitching. Reporting those things is being caring of another individual and their success, and caring about your organization. And so, getting at the people and communicating and making sure that the leaders educate their people. This is not punitive. This is so that we can help people and keep them employed. The last thing people want to do is have to go through another hiring action, or firing action for that matter, right? If anybody's been in the government knows how painful that is. You want to help people and rehabilitate.
Thanks, Tricia. Hunter, what do you see as best practices?
I mean, bottom line is everybody wants to work in a safe and secure environment, so this all ties into the ownership piece I talked about earlier. I can't stress the importance of educating the workforce on insider risk indicators. It's probably the most important thing to do in empowering and providing a sense of ownership to your populace, your workforce there. As stated earlier, that in addition to having very good coordination and relationships with your legal folks, your privacy folks, your leadership, human resources, all being on the same sheet of music is absolutely critical. Third, third, having effective tools in your toolkit. As a former federal agent, I had like investigative toolkit. I had tools in there, right? Same thing goes for insider risk. You want to have your insider risk toolkit. You're gonna have certain tools in there. PAI being one of them. So, got to have good tools out there. You have good tools, good analysts, and good investigators. That you can't beat that. That's a match made in heaven. Furthermore, the insider risk management team itself, whether it's the team leader, the investigators, or the analysts, they all need to be a professional cadre of personnel who've been there, done that, who know this space very, very well. Seasoned CI people are obviously very well suited for this type of work. Lastly, coordination with and liaison with other security personnel, counterintelligence, law enforcement investigations like DCSA, FBI are also very pivotal to the holistic insider risk management program. You want to have routine meetings with those folks, coordination with those folks, and just great relationships. Relationships matter in everything that we do, and you can't beat having great relationships with your liaison partners out there to get this mission done.
Mo, how about you?
Again, I think building exactly on what my colleagues have said here, I think the people aspect of it is critical, and it is a cultural thing. So I think our leaders would dictate the culture, dictate the policy around that, and provide the appropriate resources to support that. And like my colleagues said, it's not punitive, it's prevention, and get our people invested as part of the ownership process into that. I think the resources is going to be critical, as we have executive orders to mandate this. It needs to be coupled with a resource to support those programs, and the resources could be technology as well. For me, building on people also means who are my partners within the organization. They're going to help me build a solid, holistic program. If I was running the insider risk program, I'm going to, take a proactive step and reach out to my policy partner, to my legal partner, make sure that they are involved every step of the way to establishing my SOPs, my rules of behavior. They're going to be critical to establishing a privacy impact assessment or privacy assessment. So definitely getting the people as stakeholders early in the process, those would be critical. But the resources and the technology also needs to be set by the leadership from high up.
Thanks, Mo. Now, we've talked a bit so far about the current state of insider risk and threat management, what do you see, Tricia, as the future of this area?
I think that everybody's starting to it's getting more mature. It's been around for a little while now, and I think that folks are finally realizing that they really need to differentiate the insider threat program. And I wanted to go back to something we talked about earlier. Words matter, to Hunter's point, right? And people, just still are seeing this as a punitive program. And the Arliss folks, in all their research that they're doing, they coined a term, insider trust. And I thought that was a really cool term. We want to trust insiders, right? They're not threats. We trust our people, right? And so I think reframing, recasting, marketing and outreach, getting your message out that this is not your security, law enforcement, counterintelligence. This is not a background investigation. This is not a continuous evaluation program. It's different. And it's different because we're trying to identify risks and help people before those risks become threats. And so we really need to get that word out there. It really needs to be a complete campaign on what these programs are, but most importantly, what they're not. And I also believe that there needs to be, and I know this is backed by the DIPMAC all the time, they want enterprise solutions in information sharing and incident reporting, and incident analyzation, so to speak. They want it to be data driven. Well, how do you make it data driven? Well, first off, it's using some of the tools that Mo just spoke of, right? And these tools are there to help. They aren't authoritative tools. They're there to get additional content that can really help get after a issue that could be percolating. So I think those are optimistic sites for the future.
Thanks. Hunter, what's your view on the future state? Hunter, I unmute. We told you weren't allowed.
Apologize. So sorry about that. My apologies. So we talked a little bit about earlier about the policies. I think the future, has a lot of policies coming to fruition. When it comes to building and managing and leading a holistic insider risk management program. The DoD and other organizations, when they're putting these policies together, Mo mentioned this earlier, SOPs, standard operating procedures. Based off your policies, you devise and you develop standard operating procedures to put in place to carry out that policy. So that's important to do, but you got to start with the policy first. So once you get the policy, do the SOPs, and you see it through, you codify everything, and you see it all through. There's going to be a lot of work in crafting those procedures, developing those standard operating procedures, and we got to ensure that there's consistency too. Not only the Department of Defense, but I say in commercial enterprise as well. Consistency is key as we get these programs implemented, throughout the DoD and the commercial enterprise.
Mo, I know you had some thoughts about that as well. What's your take on the future of these programs?
Yeah, I'm actually very hopeful as I've kind of seen an evolution, if you will, on guidance that's coming up top from a lot of stakeholders, including OD&I. I think OD&I continues to provide periodic guidance that sets bookends on the general framework of these things. And I've seen the language evolve where it empowers organizations to build on those bookends, a process or a policy that best fits that organization or their mandate. So I think a continuous review of the policy that comes from up on high, down low, that's going to be super critical. That is an evolving process. So we can't have a policy that waits every 5 years to be evolved, because just the technology and the data that's required is going to need just to be a more agile approach to that. I also see it as the evolution, or my thought would be that it could be a more proactive approach instead of a reactive approach. And again, a lot of that has to do with using what Tricia said, like an enterprise or a systemized approach to that. And I think technology can play a really valuable role to have a repeatable processes in place that mimic the policies on paper. So that takes away from the human bias or the resource limitations or timing or backlog. I think technology and data can play a super valuable role, that we have a repeatable processes that are easy to explain, understand, and defend going forward.
Great point. Thanks. So as we inch towards the end of the program, we know we have insider threat professionals in the audience. So Tricia, what advice would you offer to insider threat professionals at this juncture?
Don't give up. Keep your chin up. I'll be your little cheerleader, but you know, focus on your messaging. You know, it's all about prevention and protection. Get those you know, nasty old security words and vernacular out of your portfolio, especially when you're talking about the insider threat program. If you want it to be successful, you know, just be your own advocate, sell your program. It's like anything that I did in my entire career in the Department of Defense. You know, when I was successful, I was always marketing what I needed done to my senior leadership. What does that do? Either they buy it or they don't, but if they buy it, they give you resources to support it. So, you know, you gotta stay positive. You gotta educate your folks. You gotta educate your leadership. You gotta get your leadership engaged. You gotta set up those horror programs, you know, meaning reach out to your HR folks and your law enforcement folks and your lawyers and your CIO, and get them to the table and talk about how you guys can work together to make a more wholesome program that is effective. And I thought it was interesting. One of the things that James Chappelle, director of DIPMAC, mentioned to me, he goes, you know, I really wanted to be able to start getting statistics to talk about success stories. You know, success stories, how we helped somebody. And you know, usually you're always, you know, doing the aftermath of bad stuff. And so I thought that was really kind of a cool concept, and I applaud him for that. And I think that everybody in DoD can help James and the DIPMAC get there. And then, you know, I'm not gonna not say that, you know, your PAI tools, you know, that's one of them, but I think it's critical. It's just tipping and queuing and content, you know, adding more content and context to information that you might already have. And so you got to start using those, and don't be afraid. So take those to your lawyers and say, I want to start using this. What's my right and left limits? But don't say no. Don't take no for an answer.
Hunter, what's your view on what you would say to insider threat professionals at this stage?
Yeah, I think Trisha has a great point. I just want to piggyback off one of them. Like, so, you know, again, the success stories. I think that's a great point. You know, putting my old federal agent hat on. You know, we got paid, you know, to do a job to find the facts. Okay, we weren't the judge, jury, and executioner. We found the facts. And if I got an allegation that walked through my door and I disproved it and I exonerated the subject, that's a win. I found the facts. I exonerated someone. You know, there's something to be said for that, right? So it dovetails to Trisha's point. You know, we got to share those success stories. Like if Johnny Smith has a top secret SCI clearance, and you know, through PI tools and your insider risk management program, we find out he's got a serious drinking problem. You know, we can intervene proactively, you know, from the employee assistance program standpoint, and get Johnny Smith some help, you know, to get him out of that predicament. So there's something to be said for that. So you know, sharing those success stories, I think, is key. So I just wanted to piggyback off that. But you know, again, I go back to my first line of defense. You know, your workforce, empower them, engage them proactively, get them on board. I think that's just, you know, just absolutely critical. And I just like to, you know, piggyback on my last point, your previous point on words have meaning. You know, so keep that in mind when you're out there doing the job. You know, keep that in mind. Words have meaning. You know, negative connotations, you want to stay away from those. Like, again, like I said, employee safety and wellness program. You know, try to use that word instead of insider risk program. Using the word report even has a negative connotation. So, you know, take those things to mind when you're out there educating your folks, and I think you'll have a lot of success. And policies, processes, and SOPs. You know, got to build those effective policies, develop those SOPs, and to set your program up for your success. And Mo brings up a great point about, routinely visiting those, because those should be like kind of living documents, right? Because everything evolves. Like a half a year into your program and some technology comes out, you've got to revamp your policies and your SOPs and what have you. You got to keep up with that stuff. So it's almost like a living, breathing process. And lastly, again, hiring the right professionals to do this important mission. Simply put, you can't put a price tag on providing a safe and secure environment for your workforce as a leader. Okay, leadership's everything. And you've got to provide adequate support adequate support needs to be brought to bear to make your program be successful. We've got to have the right professionals, got to get the right tools, the right training. You got to throw resources at it. If you don't throw resources at it, you're not going to have an effective program. So as a leader, it's imperative upon you to give your folks the right tools and training to do the job.
Thanks. Mo, did you want to add some final thoughts?
No, I just
to
paused a
that?
little bit when Trisha said hang in there, because I really think that it's a big part of it. Like, it's an important mission, and the professionals that support this space really have to hang in there, because this mission is constantly evolving. But I think ownership from our professionals is key to this. Don't wait for your policy or privacy or legal partners to come to you. Reach out to them. Find out what's important to them. Find out what can attribute to your program and balance their requirements. Their sign off is critical to getting these programs off the ground. So definitely be proactive. Don't wait. Reach out to them. Education is also important. Education to the insider risk professionals, but also education to the workforce. It's super critical that we have these periodic reviews. Every one of us takes those annual insider risk training. I think they're super enlightening, super informative, not just to the workforce, but also to the professionals. So definitely hang in there. But definitely the ownership part, and then seeking out advocacy from within the organization. I would also add that seeking partnerships across federal law enforcement and within the community is critical. There are pockets of excellence out there. They have published how they've done their privacy impact assessments or their PTAs. Seek out their guidance. They figured out something that maybe works for them. Maybe it's an 89% solution that could be repeatable within your organizations. So definitely there's lots of best practices out there within the community that can play a supporting role if you don't have that program off the ground from a documentation perspective. And I think industry and technology overall can play a supporting role in the agile approach to how this threat landscape can evolve. It can help government be a little bit ahead of how this evolutionary process continues to be.
Wonderful. Thank you. Well, we've reached the end of the formal part of our program, but we do have questions that have come in from members of the audience. So I'd like to jump into a couple of those questions. And the first one is, what mechanisms have you seen work for enhanced information sharing, especially in an environment, and institutional framework that's essentially based in secrecy? So, Mo, how would you address that?
I think we always have to be mindful of what is publicly or what is privately available in terms of information secrecy. But I think having those forums between the federal law enforcement partners and the various different programs within Insider Risk, there's roundtables, there's best practices. Those tend to be a good melting pot, if you will, of these best practices. They're done in closed up forums. They allow folks to share those best practices. And then, yes, it's mindful that we are inherently working in an environment where secrecy is super important, is super critical, but those best practices are out there for sure.
Hunter or Tricia, do you want to add to that about mechanisms for enhanced information sharing?
Yeah, I mean, I'll just piggyback on what Mo says. I'm a back to basics guy. It goes back to my earlier comment. Relationships matter. Again, you've got to put the time in making the relationships. Because if you don't, you're gonna fall on a sword. You've got to take the time to develop those relationships to set you up for success when you're operating your insider risk management program. Like things like Mo said, that that the law enforcement relationships, the other external entities out there, sharing best practices. Hey, I tried this worked well. If you can template off other people's success, that's great. Why create the wheel if it you don't need to. So again, my bottom line is there. Back to basics. Relationships matter.
Trish, did you have any thoughts on that?
I'm going to go back to the things that the DITMAC is saying is the most effective so far, and that is those PAR programs at the bases, where you have those councils with everybody represented, you know, the HR, the law enforcement, and so on and so forth, you know, everybody at the table, and everybody comes at it, and they respect every, you know, they're not going to go out and shout to the rooftop the information they share across that table. You know, that's a very private forum, but it's a very effective forum. I would also recommend, I know this is, we practiced this when I think when I was at the Director of Security for the Army. We would get together with our other military service counterparts, and we would get our attorneys together. And, you know, especially when you have an attorney that is on the, let's just say, on the cutting edge of, you know, willing to help you get to yes. And maybe somebody else's attorney is a little bit more conservative. Believe it or not, attorneys don't all think the same. And so if you get them together and have a forum and talking, and sometimes that's hard. Sometimes they won't even do it. But if you can get them together and find a policy that has worked and get them to talk to each other about it, we found it to be quite effective.
Thanks very much for that. We do have another question, which is around the advancements in insider risk programs. So what are some of the most critical advancements that have occurred recently in insider risk programs? Mo, why don't I start with you again on that one?
Yeah, I think with the deluge of information and technology, automation is going to play a key role as a major advancement in insider risk. There's, you know, we've talked about publicly available information and how that's now more than 80% of the available data that's out there that could be potentially play a positive role. I think with limited resources, automation is going to play a key role, not just to go through the vast amount of data, go through the backlog, but also automation could play a significant role in being proactive, right? Like going through all that information. So information comes in all different sizes, languages, formats, what have you. So having a systemized automation process that mimics the policies of the organization, I think automation can play a really, really big role, not just reactively, but proactively as well.
Hunter?
I've got nothing to add. My colleague nailed it. Good job, man.
Trish, did you have anything you wanted to add to that one?
Mo stole all of our thunder, Rebecca. So we're gonna just give him
I would
credit
agree.
for that.
Yeah, that one pretty well nailed it. So it looks like there's one more question, which is good because we're coming up on time. But do you see any crossover or commonality from insider risk management in the government to insider risk management in commercial enterprises? And Hunter, why don't I start with you on this one?
Sure. Yeah, so being in the security arena for my entire career, going a few years back now, I was kind of amazed at the lack of insider risk management programs within commercial entities. Obviously, the government had to have one because of 13587, right? But in my daily job, I'd go out and talk to C-suite individuals, and I just ask them the question, just like we're drinking a beer or whatever, and just ask them, hey, do you have an insider threat or insider risk management program? Resoundingly 80-90% of them were no. So based on my experience, as a retired federal agent being in the security industry my entire life, like, there's two biggest threats out there, in my opinion: the cybersecurity threat and the insider threat. Like, those two threats will bring your organization to its knees. So it was I was shocked when, a few years ago, I'd be asked those questions, and resoundingly 80-90% of them would say no. So fast forward a couple of years to now, I think, the light's kind of going on. I'll give you an example, like a hospital, for instance. If you have an insider threat and he shuts down all your Internet of Things and you have people dying on your watch at a hospital, I mean, that's front page news, right? Nobody wants that negative press or anything like that. Nobody wants anybody to die on your watch, right? So I think a lot of people are coming to the realization that it's a necessary evil that they have an insider risk program. You got to mitigate the risk, right, to organizations. So I think people have kind of it's an awareness thing, right? People are becoming aware of the threats that are out there. The nation, not even that, the nation state, China, Russia, those are threats as well. They could wreak havoc, right? So I think people are becoming more aware in leadership positions, and they're coming to the realization that they need to get on board and they need to establish, insider risk management program within their organization to keep their organization safe.
Mhm. Mo, what's your take on crossover between commercial and government when it comes to insider threat?
I think the fundamentals and the best practices are the same. As a matter of fact, a lot of the professionals that run inside a risk program in the commercial space actually have a robust history coming out from government and supporting the same programs. I think the stuff we talked about, data, technology, automation, all those fundamentals are the same. What changes is what is the threat vector? Where on the government side, it could be state secrets, it could be special programs, what have you. While on the commercial sector, it's intellectual property, it's executive protection, it's certain products or whatever that are not ready for market that is now going out to the market. That's definitely an exposure. So I think while they may not look the same, I think the best practices and the fundamentals are really the same. With maybe what one sector versus another can classify as derogatory may change, but I think the plumbing is the same, if you will.
Right. It seems to be, all about the safeguarding and protecting of both employees and data, whether it happens to be government employees, commercial employees, and whatever those sources of data may be. Like you said, Mo, the principles are the same in terms of the steps you should be taking as an insider risk professional to set up a type of holistic program that encompasses those safeguarding and protection modes. Trish, did you have any final thought on that?
Yeah, and I would also say on the commercial sector side, their bandwidth of reach on what they can use data-wise is probably a little wider than government. And so, but I don't see any difference between the two because quite frankly, everybody has the people aspect. It starts there and you have people on both sides. It's just a matter of what commodity is at risk, right? And in DoD, it's national security. And for many of the commercial sector, it's their bottom line. And I think everybody knows how commercial sector likes to protect their bottom line, and rightly so. So I think I think most of agencies or most companies now have, they might not call it insider threat, all right, but they have some sort of a risk management program because they have to. And I would, Rebecca, like to just, there's a resource out there that I didn't even know about that was shared with me that I want to share with this group. And the DITMAC and their CDSC, the Center for Defense Security Excellence, so that's their training site. Those two get together and they're both under the Defense Counterintelligence and Security Agency. They do monthly webinars on insider threat. So if you anybody out there didn't know that, they do. They list them on the CDSE website, and they also list them on LinkedIn. So I don't know where on LinkedIn. I'm still not very well versed. I'm getting a lot better with LinkedIn, but working on it. But y'all should check them out because I think any kind of resources that you can get to learn more and steal from somebody else that has a program that's working, you should do it.
Great, thanks for that information.
Rebecca, I got an alibi on that. Just to piggyback off the education piece. Carnegie Mellon is phenomenal in this domain. So their insider risk training programs are phenomenal. They have classes that you can go to. I went to one in April for a week. Phenomenal training. So take advantage of that as well. Carnegie Mellon University.
Wonderful. Thanks, Hunter. At this point, I'd like to turn it back over to Maggie to wrap us up.
Thank you, Rebecca. You've been a fabulous moderator. Thank you to Trisha, Hunter, and Mo for being with us today. I want to thank all of our participants who joined us. We hope you enjoyed this webinar and we hope it's been helpful to you and your organization.